Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Blue Dragon 5 here. And today we are discussing The Iron Giant for the 25th anniversary. It's a retrospective podcast, but to do the job right, I wanted to bring in some of the big guns, but not the terrifying giants, like energy center in the with like more of the world's spires coming out of its back kind of gun. No, not terrifying like a Tomo gun. No. I brought in an animation heavyweight that we have. We bring up for special occasions. I brought the incredible, the phenomenal Phil Machi. Say hi to folks, Phil.
Oh my gosh, I don't know that I deserve all that, but thanks very much for having me on the show, Dragon.
Yeah, and he's no Tony Facilli, but he'll do.
Well, anyway, who is though?
That is true. All right. So Phil, it's good to have you back.
Yeah, nice to be back. It's been a little while.
So you're probably wondering again. I highly doubt anyone's like gone way back to the deep catalog of things, like way back, roughly. I mean, depending on how you mark it, like on the wall, let's say, like in terms of how many years have gone by. Approximately 10 years ago, one of the first things Tika and I did, one of the early things Tika and I did, back when we had like labels for this sort of thing, the Kickback Cafe and everything. We discussed the Iron Giant, and just kind of feeling out the kind of stuff we wanted to talk about, just kind of like going through it. And it was figured, a lot of time has passed, and maybe plus now we have like a signature edition of the Iron Giant and everything. So perhaps we should, it will behoove us to kind of celebrate this milestone of one of the most beloved films in the animation industry. So that's what we're here to do. And I guess can I get the ball rolling? First off, hi, Lucas Green. Got him in the comments. Says, hi, guys. Lovely film. I concur. So I guess my kind of thesis on the Iron Giant, looking back on it, a definitive classic, represents the best of the medium. Brad Bird's first cinematic venture. Just I think we all get nostalgic ties to this one way or another. I mean, I wasn't one of the few in the theater when this came out, but I think like a lot. I think I like a lot of people. I kind of experienced this on home video. More specifically, I remember like taping it when it was on HBO, and they kind of would play on HBO and everything. And watching it many times when it would like replay on Cartoon Network when they kind of made a deal like that, because I think historically when they tried to recoup the money on the Iron Giant, they kind of sold the rights to Cartoon Network, or at the very least they kind of had like what now we would call streaming rights. Back then it was just like a broadcasting kind of rights sort of thing. This is probably like a remarkably quick turnaround, and like, man, the movie just came out and no one saw it, and now we're gonna put it on TV.
Yeah, it's a different. We're coming at it in a different era for sure. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but a lot has changed from how people consume media now.
Yeah. I mean, I think looking back at the Iron Giant, kind of round out my thoughts on it here, is that it basically was a Pixar film made by Warner Brothers. Essentially, that's kind of what the Iron Giant is. It's again, this is the fire that's kind of stoked and inspired the animation industry, much like Toy Story did when it came out. And this is kind of separated by about 4 years in a different medium. But it's just I mean. It was if only it was. It's a shame it wasn't successful in its day, but it was for sure. That's the only difference between it and Toy Story. And Toy Story was beloved and got all it made the money back. It got the critics' praise, got the audience praise. Iron Giant's not that it didn't get those praises, that no one knew it was out. No one knew it was a thing, and it just kind of it bygoned everything.
There was a lot of problems with marketing in the late 90s animation world, so it wasn't just an exclusive Iron Giant problem. It was just a marketing problem in general, and a lot of films that were quite good ended up getting overlooked.
One of the most famous examples, Phil,
I would say Cats Don't Dance.
Yeah, also
I would say Titan AE.
Well, I don't know. Well, Titan AE is okay.
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's not a great film, but what I mean is, it's a film that got overlooked and ended up,
right.
Leading to the the shutting down of a studio. So I mean, it had a real the ripple effects were felt very strongly in the industry. You know,
But even just going with the Warner Brothers of it all, like this is not the first time this has happened. Most infamous example that kind of
oh,
like
you mean
shares.
Batman? Batman you mean
Mhm.
Mask of the Phantasm is what
That,
you're referring to?
yes, sir.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
of course, of course.
Mask of the Phantasm, which again, if I forget what the, I don't know, I'm sure someone's gonna have all sorts of technicalities on me here, but let's be honest. Essentially, Mask of the Phantasm was the first, name, animated superhero film, in terms of like a feature, feature length, superhero film that was
Yeah, the
animated.
problem is they released it for like 2 weeks, and it was around Christmas,
Yep.
and it had one showtime each day, which is around like 12:30 in the afternoon. So kind of
I
hard
can
to do well.
I can count on one hand the marketing that it had. Okay, it's three fingers, not even a full hand. Okay, it's okay. You had the trailer,
Yeah,
which again I'm sure didn't play a lot. You had the trailer. You had I think HBO technically. I forget if it was HBO specific. HBO, there was like this very brief kind of like little like kind of like 14-minute bonus feature they did about it very briefly, which I mean it was good, but that's what I'm saying. It's very brief and like yeah, I think you only had to have HBO, which is before it became the powerhouse that it was. And lastly, most embarrassingly, on the McDonald's packaging for I believe just mainly for Batman the Animated Series, they had this they had Happy Meal toys, and on the Happy Meal box, like barely an inch, like hidden on the box, it said Batman Mask of the Phantasm coming out December 25th, 1993.
hmm
That was it. Of course, there were the Kenner toys, but that's what I'm saying was barely the one specific toy to the movie, the Phantasm. That had its own issues. The whole like, oh wait, it's this character. That's a spoiler.
yeah. Well, good marketing and bad marketing. I mean,
Mhm.
it could make or break your movie, and I mean, even Disney has fallen prey to that with a lot of their sci-fi outings. Like Atlantis had horrible marketing, Strange World had horrible marketing, and
Yeah,
Treasure Planet had horrible marketing.
it's an epidemic. So Phil, what are your ties to the Iron Giant? What does it mean to you?
So I don't like. I love the film. I don't have a lot of heavy nostalgia because I don't really remember when I first saw it, and I can't. I feel a little embarrassed saying that, but I don't remember if it was college or if I saw it on home video before I went to college. But I do remember when I finally saw it that it was just that the emotion was gripping, and it was something that I don't think I expected. Um, the way that they really brought out the humanity in the form of or through the eyes of a robot was just a brilliant concept. And I think what little boy doesn't, or even little girl, doesn't, have an imaginary friend that seems larger than life like that.
Yeah. All right, so let me hit you with some background here. I'm going to try and condense it as much as I can. Now, mind you, folks, on this, a lot of this I'm kind of parroting from this wonderful documentary they released. You can find it on YouTube. It's on the signature edition of the Iron Giants called Giant Stream. I highly recommend it. Phil, did you ever see it?
Giant Stream, no, I've not
Oh,
seen it.
Phil, you gotta watch this. I'm not gonna do it justice here, but I'm just gonna highlight some of the stuff
Okay.
that's relevant here. Okay, so long story short, the way we get the Iron Giant is this. So Brad Bird, he's the wonderkin hire for Disney Animation. I forget if it's in the '70s or the '80s, but essentially it's Disney in during what I like to call the assembly line years, in which they basically they're turning them out. The artistry's gone. It's a bunch of guys in suits basically yes, but we want to make children's animation stuff. This is where we're putting out stuff like, it's kind of like we're probably in the precipice of the Black Cauldron, but we're getting like Aristocats and stuff like that. It's very much just like nothing fancy. It's like
What
post.
what what, what years are you talking about?
Well, I forget if Brad Bird was there during the '70s. I think it's the '80s because he and John Lasseter were brought in the '80s, so I think it's probably in the
Okay.
early
Well,
'80s period.
Aristocats is 70s.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It could have been. That's still what I would deem the assembly line period. After Walt died, until kind of the Wake and Sleeping Beauty years. That's
Well,
essentially the
I will
years.
tell you. I don't. Just for point of clarification, I would say Aristocats really doesn't fall into the assembly line era quite yet because it came out immediately after Jungle Book, and so there was a little bit of production of Aristocats that happened while Walt was still alive.
Okay.
The first film that actually happens completely without Walt is Robin Hood.
Gotcha.
Which is 77, I think.
Okay. Well, even then, you're kind of like you still kind of have that vibe there, where it's like Robin Hood has a lot going for it, but by the same token, though, it's like you kind of the spark is kind of dwindling, starting with Robin Hood onward. I don't know, but
yeah.
Anyway, the point being, like things, Disney's being run by guys in suits around the time that Brad Bird's there, and I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure it's the '80s because again, that's where I know he, Lasseter, and Tim Burton are there for a brief bit. Anyway, it's probably like between '80 to '84 is probably when that's going on. Anyway, so point being, Brad Bird, he gets fired because he keeps trying to inspire the animators and he's causing a ruckus, saying, "Guys, we got to do more here. We got to challenge the status quo here." And he ends up getting fired. And he's trying to get a Spirit, an animated movie based on the Spirit, the Will Eisner comic, made. It's amazing test footage that he's got. Basically, this is during a period where Disney was the superpower in animation, where it's like no one else, like, you can't turn this into a feature. This is going to be impossible to make. You're out of your mind. And then he develops Ray Gun, which currently is back in production at Skydance. Ray Gun, basically kind of like a futuristic noir detective movie, which I'm so looking forward to. Anyway, so he's developing this with Turner, and this is when Turner gets bought by Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers, basically at this point in time, there's like kind of the what I would call the animation arms race going on, where Warner Brothers Animation is like a brand new thing in terms of feature animation. It's a brand new thing. They kind of they basically, in buying Turner, they kind of get Brad Bird's contract, so they offer him a movie. They offer him, because they see a lot of potential in him. He's done The Simpsons at this point and everything. They offer him this Iron Giant musical, which is based off Ted Hughes's book, The Iron Man, and was basically, they had a musician attached to it. Pete Townsend was developing. It was going to be like a musical. They had a terrible looking CG Iron Giant character with probably like a 2D backdrop. Looked like crap. And essentially, Brad Bird, he looked into like the dedication on the book, where basically Ted Hughes, he wrote this book because his children were grieving over their mother's death. Their mother committed suicide, and it's basically him trying to it's a book kind of about piecing yourself back together after sadness. And Brad Bird, at this point in time, he suffered a great personal tragedy. His sister was a victim of gun violence, and that very much kind of hit a chord with him. And he basically, long story short, again, like he pitched Warner Brothers like this epic pitch, the most epic pitch you've ever seen. Of course, Brad Bird's a pitch man, if you've ever seen one. This guy, he knows how to rally the troops. And he basically he gathers them. He basically, off the cuff, practically, he basically tells them, like, okay, let's take the Iron Man concept and let's kind of add, like, let's set it in the 50s. Let's set it in America, not England. Let's 50s paranoia, Sputnik, and then it kind of hits on the cell line, which kind of were all clarified for him, the theme of the film. What if a gun had a soul? That's the tagline. That's the cell line. Their soul, like, yes, you got yourself a movie, buddy. He assembles a ragtag team of animators. This is where Brad Bird gets his crew, and basically a lot of them went to Pixar with him when he's working on Incredibles, Ratatouille, and they kind of stick around for other projects. You got Tony Faccioli, you got Teddy Newton, you got the great Mark Andrews, storyboard man extraordinaire. Andy Jimenez, Jeff Lynch on story, Steve Markowski on animation, Dean Wellens. I could go on. The point being, you have, like, these are the guys at the end. These are guys like-minded to Brad Bird, like true blue, animators. Like, these guys live for the craft. We got Michael Kamen doing the score. This is the guy who scored Die Hard, Lethal Weapon. As far as research goes, they took a road trip to Maine, which is, of course, a Rockwell setting, and I'm sure it's no accident. They basically, the art style of the film is a combination of, it's very 101 Dalmatians inspired, kind of crossed with a Norman Rockwell painting, hence the whole Rockwell, Maine kind of thing.
Yep.
So, let's see. Oh, yeah. So there were challenges with this film. challenges up the yin yang. They're working against the clock, and that clock is that Warner Bros. Animation is screwing up all their other animated projects, and they're also getting overshadowed by other things that are coming out. And because of that, there's kind of a ticking clock of, oh God, what if they pulled the plug on the studio altogether? Not only that, they're working with a third of a budget of a Disney feature.
Yep.
They're working with half the time, so roughly 2 years, maybe 2 years and change, compared to like the 4 to 5 year period they kind of have going on at this time. And on top of this, like these battling executive thinking, which is like, like, hey, can we throw like a little animal sidekick in here? Can we put some bigger names in our voice cast, like Schwarzenegger as Kent Mansley? Can we get like John Travolta as Dean? Can we, can we do this? And their competition's Tarzan. There's a lot, there's a lot working against them here. And while this film's going on, there are a lot of technical breakthroughs that are very underreported. And Andy Jimenez discovered, well, essentially he kind of stumbled into. I don't know if he technically was the first person ever to do this, but at least in the field of animation, Andy Jimenez, he basically discovered the animatic. He discovered the previs, like kind of a previs animatic of sorts, using After Effects. Basically, you Xerox and you kind of turn like the storyboard into kind of like an actual moving picture. Anyway, a few other little side notes here. No, sorry, I know I'm droning on, but just let me. The design of the Iron Giant, Joe Johnston, a man who directed Captain America: First Avenger, worked on Star Wars, and basically, directed Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Basically, the man who designed the Iron Giant, and one of the big things he did was the Rocketeer, which you can kind of see in the face of the Iron Giant, along with Mark Whiting, Whitting. He kind of added like kind of the heft and like kind of like the hip alignment, like the pot pie arms on the giant, all that kind of stuff. So they kind of added like kind of the shading to him. And again, as Phil and I just kind of alluded to at the top here, film tested through the roof. People loved it. Anyone who saw it, even in pencils, they were blown away. Even if it was unfinished, they were saying, "Oh my!" It's like the Beauty and the Beast thing. Even in pencils, part of the film in pencils, like people are going to go nuts for it. They love it. But again, all that tension, all that pressure, like they're like the studio's finally on board. Like they're shedding tears watching. Oh my God, this film's like this could be an Oscar film practically before we even have an Oscar. and then they're realizing, okay, look, so give us some time, give us a few months to a year. We'll put it out there, we'll market it, and it'll go great. But Brad Bird's at this point, he's had up to here. These guys, you had like 2 years while we're working on this to market this film. You didn't lift a finger, and there's a genuine fear of if we don't release this, the studio completely tanks, which in a few years it practically did. Before they rebranded, it just essentially is like if we don't do this now, like they might completely pull the plug on it if they screw up their other films or they lose their nerve or something, or if money men make a decision here, or we release it now, even with the low marketing that we have. So it's like we either we wait a year and risk it just basically getting the Batgirl or the Scoob treatment. Could be shelved for all they know. Or we just take our chances when we release it now. And Brad Bird, he released it. He said, okay, guys, look, we got to push for it now. Okay, everyone worked hard on this. It looks great. It can definitely hold up against Tarzan. I want to be clear. I love Tarzan. I'm just saying that they were very confident. These are two really good movies. Anyway, comes out.
Disaster. The cops found me. The cops. They found me. Hide me.
Run, Phil, run. It's like E.T., kids. Okay, no. Okay, so anyway, so disastrous release. When it debuted, it much like Phantasm when it debuted, it just utterly bombed because no one knew it was out. Everyone's like seeing the more highly publicized films. Years later, it becomes a cult classic. Again, still beloved, hasn't lost a beat, and landed Brad Bird, The Incredibles, and all the things that kind of came from that. So
yeah, Brad's doing just fine.
He is. He needs to do more, but he's doing just fine. Again, this Ray
Well,
Gunn movie, I'm so
that
looking forward to.
that's how you know he's doing fine. He doesn't need to do more.
Well, yeah, but it's just like the desire, which I mean, again, this whole Ray Gunn thing. I tell you, Phil, I'm just gonna say this, and we're gonna move on. The big question for Ray Gunn is like, will it be 2D or will it be 3D? I mean, I think it's going to be good either way, but I'm just really curious. Like, would he push for 2D? It would be such a
Well,
reversal of how The Incredibles went, because The Incredibles started as a 2D film.
there is talk about there being some 2D stuff happening over at Disney right now.
Yeah.
So stranger things have happened.
That's true. Okay, I'm gonna read some comments, and then we're gonna break it in however we see fit here. All right, let's see. Okay. Lucas Green. The characters are all identifiable. Hogarth is responsible. Dean is content. Doesn't let things bother him. Giant learns that even Mansley is acting out of fear during the time it takes place in. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of ironic. Warner Bros. Animation didn't have many successful features until recently. That is true. All right, let's see. Okay, Code Geass anime fan. I have more nostalgia for the advertising for the Iron Giant than for the film itself, because so many of my videos advertised it. Well, yeah, because the home video basically had like the trailers for the Iron Giant, which, by the way, Iron Giant's the main trail the Iron Giant had at the time theatrically was a disastrous like heavy, but it was a very like get ready for some heavy metal. It was like completely missing the point of the film.
Yeah, well, I mean, Atlantis wasn't much better. They were playing "Come Sail Away" by Styx in their trailer, and it's like I don't really think that applies, but okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's just dive into it. All right. So I guess maybe the place to start, and again, Phil, you want to take us anywhere, by all means, take us somewhere. I'm gonna say maybe a place to start is like from the get go. We establish tone and atmosphere with the opening, and just with our transition from the opening. We build up the Iron Giant with a very close encounters kind of moment. We kind of set up the 50 sci-fi tone. Basically, let's take 50s B movie sci-fi, but give it like a cinematic scope and add like oddly such a realism through the animation of like this is what like an encounter of like a possibly a giant campy thing would be. Possibly okay, so it's going to be like Attack of the 50-foot woman, but she's made of iron, or the Iron Lady, so to speak here. In like kind of the worst case B movie sci-fi kind of thing. It's Robbie the robot, but he's 50 feet tall.
They could have played Iron Maiden.
You're right. But yeah, I like that we strike a tone here. We go from 50s sci-fi B movie to kind of Norman Rockwell. So we're eased in. We have the setting established. We have the drama of it, and then we have just kind of the well-worn kind of like painting on the screen.
Yes, I have no notes.
So let's talk about Hogarth. How do you feel about Hogarth Hughes, Phil?
It's an odd name for a kid, but I think what's fun about the style of animation for Hogarth and the film in general is they managed to make something that felt kind of relatable but awkward and a little bit. It almost feels made for TV, not in a bad way. Just the way it looks like a cartoon you could see on a Saturday morning show that when you see him in class and things like that. So it's a very approachable look. But what I think is interesting is then you marry that to the scope and scale of all the outdoors scenes and of course the giant itself, and then it takes on a different sort of feeling.
It's a very appealing look at Maine, don't you think?
Yeah, very much so. It's very approachable. You feel like you could. I spent a lot of time growing up in Northeast Ohio, in snowy, piney areas, and then going through the woods, and so there's a lot of that felt very familiar to me.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't know that about you.
Yep, I grew up in Northeast Ohio, so lots of times spent a lot of summers walking through woods and and walking along a creek and that kind of thing. So that sort of scenery I thought was really nice, and it's a perfect place to have a giant friend where people don't, you're not going to get a lot of interference because you're sort of in the middle of nowhere.
Our moderator, Jacob, will moderate for these purposes here. He is also from Ohio.
Oh, okay.
So say, oh hi, oh.
Oh dear, that was dreadful.
Yeah, I know, right?
What part of Ohio? He's not going to answer. Okay.
Well, no, he'll trust me. There you go, Central.
We're just
That's
left to wonder.
well, no, Phil. He said Central. That's
Oh, he said Central. I'm sorry.
yeah, Phil. Can you see the?
Now, yeah, I wasn't looking at the chat. Now I see it.
Okay, there you go. Near Columbus, so Central near Columbus. So there you go.
Yeah,
Okay,
it does suck that this film isn't on Max, because when I did a search recently to see where you could stream it, there was a thing online saying it was on Max, only for me to find out that nope, you have to pay $3.99 if you want to rent it anywhere. No one's got it just part of their
it's
streaming
ridiculous
catalog.
that it keeps popping. It's on net. It's on Max. It's not on Max. It's on Max. It's not on Max. They keep bringing it there. Like, hey, maybe let's put the Warner Brothers stuff on Max.
What a
No idea.
crazy idea you just said out loud.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so Hogarth. Here's the interesting. So Hogarth, you have kind of like the all-American experience represented here, especially like when he just rolled. He's on his bike, like heading to the diner again. It doesn't get more Americana than this. The kid lives in a Norman Rock. The kid lives in a Norman Rockwell painting. Yeah, but when I look back on the movie for this, when I went over the fine tooth comb for our purposes here, he's a lonely kid without a father, which again we represent really well without like ham-fistedly like spelling it out or hitting you over the head with it. We see later on he's got like he have like the little clues, like he has like a BB gun, he's got like the helmet that probably belonged to his father. You see like the photo in which the father has the helmet. He's like a pilot, and he probably died in action. Um, his mom's a waitress, and we see we get the impression that he's always bringing like home pets and everything. Like this time it's a squirrel because Annie Hughes remembers the raccoon. If we learned anything, it's like, oh, I remember the raccoon. It was not good. But anyway,
But it's very relatable. I mean, I was a kid that wanted to bring home animals and things like that. Like that's all very relatable stuff. I think they did the right thing in yeah, okay, so it is a boy and it is a robot, but there's a lot of universality in Hogarth's behaviors.
but I like how we're connecting the dots there. This kid is kind of like he's there's some loneliness there, and like later on, for mind you, it's comedic and like going like at 5 clicks a second because he's hopped up on caffeine on espresso. But he does mention like his dilemma is that he's it's not that he's a brainiac or anything, but it's that he does what he's told, like he does the homework and stuff, so he knows stuff. He's actually learning, and that makes him kind of like kind of dejected by his classmates because he's not a jock and he's not really the roughhousing type all that much, So he's anyway. It's the fact that the kid's a bit of an outcast, and there's a loneliness there, and he's trying to fill that void with a pet, and of course, ultimately, that leads to a giant companion, literally. Um, Meanwhile, that I think that also explains why he's drawn to Dean. Dean, who himself is an outcast, because he's kind of ahead of the curve. He's marching to the beat of his own drum. He's kind of seen as the '50s beatnik, when in reality he's just an artist.
Yes, I can relate.
I bet you can.
I haven't felt like belonging somewhere even when I went to art school. I mean, there was some belonging, but very, very little belonging, even in a place where I expected to belong.
Yeah. So it's just like, plus we have like, from a design standpoint, it's kind of nice we have all these imperfections on our characters in this movie too. Like he's not just like it's not cookie cutter. It's like he's got kind of the goofy kid teeth. He's got like big ears. He's a thin thin toothpick body, big head. Like it's a good. Plus, I don't know, it's a good design.
Yeah, I would agree.
Dean played by the wonderful Harry Connick Jr., which again Brad Bird had to fight for, and I think it was a very, very wise choice. He's Dean. is a non-traditional supporting character for animation, which he's not a cliche. We don't do like a lot of like the tropes with this guy. He's very. I think I would argue Dean is very much unexpectedly. He's very much the heart of the film because he comes up with the big line. He comes up with "You are who you choose to be." That defines the whole movie. Such a key line. We get this from essentially our cool guy supporting character. Dean is. We have a spark between Dean and Annie Hughes, but we don't really, we're not. It doesn't take up like half. There's not a huge subplot of it. Originally there was kind of like when they were figuring out Dean and Annie, there's like this whole thing where Teddy Newton, like one of the first things he kind of pitched to Brad, disastrously but in a hilarious way. He basically pitched like, you know, what if Dean and Annie went on a date during like kind of like a section in the movie, and basically it admittedly, it was more of like a fun thing to do while everyone's in a panic. Okay, Teddy, we're going to give you this sequence. Just see what you can do with it. And he did this whole elaborate, awesome like Dean and Annie's date, and like a lot of funny kind of wacky things happen. And ultimately, it's just like, Teddy, this is great. We're not putting it in the movie. We are going to give you though. We're going to give you the duck and cover sequence. Okay, I'll take it. And again, like that thing is that Ted Newton, he's very much a '50s guy. He kind of has that sound to him, and he kind of loves like kind of doing so. He said this movie is like heaven for him, but unfortunately, Teddy's a very out there kind of guy. Like Teddy Newton, by the way, for you and for the kids out there, uh, directed Day and Night. Also, the voice of the Chatter Telephone in Toy Story 3. That's him.
For those kids out there that are listening to this at 10:40 on a Wednesday night.
Well, they're on espresso, Phil.
Oh, okay.
They're hopped up on caffeine. They need to burn off the energy somehow.
Or maybe they're just listening on the rewind. That could be what
There could be animation nerds. There could be.
Oh, animation nerds, yes, but kids, I don't know.
I'm saying they could be like young animation nerds.
Oh, okay, all right. You're right. I don't mean
Stop undervaluing the youth of America, Phil.
I'm sorry, kids. Sorry, I didn't mean to disparage you.
You're making Ohio look bad.
Oh, don't worry. Ohio does a great job of that on its own.
Right, anyway, so let's see. So also, again, I feel, and I couldn't. There's going to be a little bit of me just overanalyzing and reading into things here. So take it with a grain of salt. Dean's got a non-conformist streak about him, and he looks out for the oddballs, which he does with Earl, who was the Emmett Walsh character, who basically was the first character to spot the giant. Of course, the fact that we have the Emmett Walsh again, sadly no longer with us, but again, legendary character actor pops up in God knows how many things like The Jerk, and even like up to Knives Out. The man's been in a lot of things. The fact that we have him in there, he feels very Americana. Point being, Brad Bird, I get a sense, was viewed by Disney as like Dean or as the beatnik with creative ideas, but was very much seen as like, this guy's going to cause trouble. We got to out him.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is. I mean, I wish I could contribute to that. It's all very speculatory, right? Because none of us were there. So who knows? Who knows what Disney really thought about Brad Bird? I'm sure Brad could tell us.
Yeah. We have Eden Kimbrough in the comments. And old animation nerds breed new animation nerds. But yes, my nerdlings are in bed.
They're breeding. Look out.
Look, they're breeding and they're going over the layouts. Not the layouts.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. Don't tell Rohit the text people, Jacob. Phil Rohit Dar. I don't know if you've ever met Rohit.
I don't think I have. I don't know this Rohit character.
He's the channel's resident lawyer and also a troublemaker, but he's our lawyer.
Oh, maybe I did meet the channel's resident lawyer. I feel like the resident lawyer was here during one of the debates.
Yeah, that's a thing. I think that's the only time I can really think you would have crossed paths with him. But yeah, I mean, God help us. We love him to pieces, but he's wacky.
I love him like he's a distant cousin.
Sure. Okay. So let's see. Okay. Brad Bird, I feel, has a talent for black and white. And, of course, we have like the '50s, brain attack, B movie, and as I said, the Teddy Newton duck and cover film.
Yes.
A lot of authenticity to the period with the black and white stuff, and of course, anytime Brad Bird's done black and white stuff, it tends to be good. Like even in The Incredibles, we have like the all things going bad for Bob Parr, the newsreel kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Uh, let's see. Let's okay. So let's talk about the again, Phil. Is there anywhere you want to go, or I just feel like I'm dominating the
I
conversation
keep
here?
thinking about how interesting it is that you got that deer scene where
Mm-hmm.
that deer dies, and it's, to me, knowing the history of Brad with Disney, it's like maybe that's a little bit of a nod to Bambi.
What?
Um,
It's fun that you. It's funny that you mentioned that. I'm going to tell you why.
please do.
So the deer scene was the hardest scene to figure out in the entire film. That was like in Pixar, they have a nickname that I know it's technically does not directly correlate to Pixar, given this is Brad Bird pre-Pixar. But let's just say for argument's sake, in Pixar they have a term called they have a nickname for this kind of sequence called Yeti's Cave. Yeti's Cave, starting with Monsters Inc., was like the hardest scene they had to reboard and kind of reconceive of God knows how, like 20 times until the event ended up on the right one. There's always that one sequence in the film that keeps changing and keeps like it's the clunker. So the deer scene was that because originally the way the deer scene went was the giant crushed the deer by accident. He went to like touch or pet the deer and he ended up like splat. And the
Oh
problem
dear.
was he could yes. And the problem was he could not believably how do you get over that sort of thing, like how do we get to like like the facts of life conversation to like to kind of get him out of that and end on like kind of a hopeful note, like when it's like, oh my god, I've killed something. It's basically the Charlie Brown I've killed it kind of moment, like how do you get him out of that?
I know how you do it. You call him a blockhead and you move on.
Yeah, so but yeah, so Brad Bird, he was a great admirer of Bambi actually. So I suspect that he basically loves Bambi, but I think like all of us, he always pointed out like with Bambi, it's like we have this really emotionally impactful moment, and then like fa la la we kind of have like everything is going all cheery in the transition. It always kind of stuck with him, it always bothered him. So it was very much something he just strived for. Like, what if we did kind of a Bambi-esque scene, but we actually had like some gravitas, and we didn't shake it off as easily. So
Which is interesting because it seems like he was pretty anti-Disney in those moments.
well, yeah, I mean, the whole movie. I mean, and again, you'll see this like if you watch like Giant Stream, you kind of see Brad Bird's feelings on Disney, where it's very much okay. Look, we'll let Disney, let them corner the market on the princess movie, or like let them do like the big, like the things we've seen them do a bunch of, and they're really good at. But let's do the thing that we're not seeing. Like, you know, let's let's shake things up. Let's do things that we're not seeing in animation here. That's
Right.
always been kind of Brad Bird's driving thing. He wants to really challenge the medium and do the things that we're not seeing. Where I mean, some people have had the perspective, and I don't think it's a wrong-minded perspective in animation,
Well,
but it is a fair point where some people have had the perspective of only animate what you can't see in real life. Why would you do a talking scene between two characters when you can do like you could go full Looney Tunes with like the like the practical, like you can like drop someone off a cliff or drop an anvil on a
right,
head, or maybe
right.
not the best examples, but you know what I mean, like do the
Yeah.
things that you can't do in live action, which I understand that perspective. On the flip side, though, and Brad Bird attests to, is like it's an even greater magic trick almost if you can see something that is so real, but with these characters in kind of a larger than life situation.
Yeah, I mean, I often think it's like a good idea to use the medium to its full potential, but there's nothing wrong with a good emotional dialogue scene if you can pull it off. But I think like what they're always struggling with, unfortunately, and this happens more so in the decades that followed Hollywood turning into a less privatized industry and more of a slaves to Wall Street industry, is they don't feel like they can take chances anymore because they have to make the investors happy. So
Mhm.
you can point to films like Iron Giant, which now have a cult following, but If they don't bring in the big numbers, then they just become a footnote to the people who are in charge of the purse strings, so to speak.
Oh yeah. So so again, just to kind of double back to specifically the deer scene. So again, they all hunkered down. They kind of they figured out what we get in the end product here, which is the hunters gun down the deer, and this is a great correlation to the Iron Giant. Where again, one of the great ideas with the Iron Giant is the whole lapsed memory thing, where it's kind of fun and cheeky, where you realize that because a lot of people always kind of have like a lot of the anime fans always have this kind of always have the debate about Goku and Superman. Of course, obviously the Iron Giant very much linked to Superman. I'm not saying he's not, but you can kind of add maybe a level of there's maybe a dash of Goku in there. It's the idea that we have our overseas equivalent to Superman, who bumps his head and loses his memory, and then becomes a much nicer person versus like the conqueror that he was kind of like bred to be.
I'll leave it to you to make a Dragon Ball Z connection.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't know. It's kind of an observation I had looking back on it because I've been especially since Toriyama's passing. Honestly, I was in the midst of it before that, which made it kind of more a little more impactful for me. But I've been reacquainting myself my anime roots with. Again, I'm like a deep cut anime guy. I'm more of like kind of the biggies. Like Dragon Ball, Yu Gi Oh. Maybe like a hair of like early Pokemon, kind of stuff like that. But nothing fancy. Yu Yu Hakusho being a biggie, and Rurouni Kenshin stuff like that. But pretty much anything you would see on Toonami, not like the deep cut Anyway, I'm drifting off point, but you see what I'm getting. I'm saying there might be a little bit of kind of a fun similarity with the other character who's
I
compared.
mean, I would say in the sense there's a giant robot in the movie, and that's a lot of anime has giant robots. So I mean, that's a place where I could think to connect it.
Sure, sure. Anyway, so but the main point I'm having here is we have this really great tabula rasa thing with the Iron Giant. The idea of this blank slate character who has this great visual expression of. He has this dent in his forehead, and when we kind of build up like the whole weaponized component of the character with the eyes. The eyes are always like the most important thing when you draw a character is how the eyes work. And we gave Joe Johnson and Mark Whitting they gave him like these C3PO kind of like more malleable C3PO lenses for the eyes. Where they have like these lids where they can like kind of emote and they can express and they can do all sorts of things here. So when it gets like red and targeted, just like seeing it come back and like the idea like the gun is bringing back the memory. It's like connecting that this feels oddly like reminiscent to me. This feels like it's striking a chord with them. You know,
Yes.
I'm just anyway. So yeah, so the Iron Giant he kind of learns about he learns about death and souls, and this is like the big emotional touchstone. Every time they did the screening of the film, this is the scene that really like the aftermath more so than the actual like gun scene. It was very much like every not a dry eye in the house.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a very emotional film.
Yeah, and I really think this scene too was like it's I would assume deeply personal for Brad Bird, just in the whole like evaluation of death often leads to introspection, and you kind of like question what all means. You would have like this soul, kind of like this question of the human soul moment, where I would wager to guess Brad Bird, in processing his grief a few years before this movie over his sister, it might have the whole question about like the soul, the big heartfelt line of like souls never die. People die, but the soul never does.
Right. Right.
I think that was like kind of the artist working through his pain, or at least kind of putting it in. Like a lot of time, you put the artist puts sweat, tears, and passion into the work, and it kind of shows up in like little subtle things maybe they didn't intend. And I think intentional or no, I think a lot of that's in there because again, the whole sell of the movie is what if the gun had a soul, and the scene
Nah,
epitomizes that
I
whole.
just make art because of the chicks.
Well, you know what they say, Phil.
What do they say?
Chicks dig giant robots.
Oh yeah, they do.
Yep, there's even a song about it.
We should
Anyway.
have that playing in the background.
Oh God, no! There's a mashup I'd love to see. All right. Anyway,
Did you ever look up the deleted scene from this film, or one of the deleted scenes?
yeah. So I'm so glad you brought that up, Phil, because I wonder if. So let me ask you this: Phil. Have you seen the signature edition yet?
Uh, I don't. I might. No, maybe I haven't seen it. I don't know. I don't think I have.
Okay, so Phil, I may or
I
may
know
not blow your mind.
there's additional scenes in the signature edition that weren't in the theaters. I know that.
So here's what they did, Phil. Years later, I want to say this was back at earliest. This was 2015. It might have actually. I think it was a few years after. I think it might have been between 2015. Actually, it was probably during the 20th anniversary. That would be my guess.
I think it was
Sounds
2015, I think is when it was.
okay. Well, anyway,
But I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
either 2015 or maybe a direct like a 20th anniversary kind of, I don't know. The point being, whenever it was released, um, they did the signature edition. Basically, what they did is they animated some of the scenes they really wanted to include that were pretty much they had the scratch. They had the scratch. So not the scratch though. It's something else. They had the actors recording the lines already. They had everything figured out, and it was very close to being fully animated. And yes, those scenes are those are the deleted scenes on the DVD you're talking about. So they animated two of those scenes and did a few minor tweaks here and there. They didn't fully George Lucas it, but let's just say there were a few spots like things they couldn't do back then
Well,
that they
thank
could.
goodness they didn't fully George Lucas it. Man, I wouldn't recommend that behavior.
Essentially, it's three specific changes. Three specific additions. They didn't subtract really. They did three things. Okay, after the sometime right before Dean hauls away the tractor with the bite taken out of it, you see him in the diner talking with Annie. So that was a deleted scene. They animated because they just had it
Right.
lying around and they kind of wanted to put it in there. And there's like no reason, like it's less than a minute. Like why not put it in there? There's a little nod to Tomorrowland. Like on the TV, the giant's hand is like turning on Tomorrowland. Because back then Brad Bird wanted to wanted Tomorrowland to be on the play on the TV, but Disney, because I guess I don't know if it was purely Disney had a spite or just like a rights thing, like Disney would not okay it, so they couldn't. But years later, after he does a movie called Tomorrowland, like okay, what the heck, let him have it. And lastly, the thing we're going to talk about now, the dream sequence, which you guessed is kind of why they called that little bonus, that little documentary I told you about Giants.
Yeah, that dream sequence is pretty wiggy.
I love it so much. It's a great scene. I like that it's not completely spelled out. It doesn't completely change things, but it does. It is substantial though. It's the fact that I love the idea already. The giant can broadcast his subconscious onto a TV unintentionally, his unconscious onto a TV, and the giant's memory has been impaired the whole movie up to this point. So the idea that he's tossing and turning, and this is right after the soul scene, so he's thinking about what Hogarth told him, and the whole movie has a really wonderful arc in the friendship of Hogarth and the giant and how it evolves. It's his evolving friendship, and more so how it impacts the giant. Because the giant starts as, he's a creature to a pet, to to a friend, and then to kind of his own thinking, feeling, kind of like to a hero. Ultimately, basically goes from kind of like he goes from pet to Superman.
Yes.
And
Well, I don't know. I mean, pet. I guess I see what you mean, but I don't know. Like, I don't know how many pets can, repeat words after you other than like a parrot.
Well, I'm just saying initially it's like rock and tree. That's all he started with, So
Yeah.
I'm saying over time
If my cat could say rock and tree, I would be just blown away.
Yeah, well, if you could say Groot, then you'd be able to make a lot of money off.
Yeah, and then I could start a rival cinematic universe.
Yeah, there you go. That's the spirit. Yeah, just have them all, instead of wearing A's on their uniforms, have them wear like button up Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah, that's the ticket.
I want to be very clear. I very much literally my day to day I do wear the button up Hawaiian shirt. So I'm with you.
Yeah, well, it's the way to go.
Yeah. All right, anyway, but yeah, so the dream sequence this is great. We basically see the giant projecting presumably his memory, where we see these giants are sent in like droves and like an army, and they're sent to conquer and destroy planets. And Dean kind of like he kind of stumbles awake, kind of like seeing all this, and it's a really great, intense kind of like eerie sequence. And again, it gives Dean a little bit of concern, a little bit of like doubt in the back of his mind. Did I just see what I thought I saw? So when that kind of adds a level to like why he's kind of turning into the giant for a moment later on.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It's a foreshadowing moment.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Oh, how do you feel about just with the giant himself? How do you feel about the whole the 3D integration with the 2D style kind of layered on top of them?
It's a lot more effective in Iron Giant than I would say if you were going to compare it to something like Hercules with the Hydra. I feel like it feels a lot more integrated. It feels like it's of the same movie, even though it's a CG character. They found a way to make it feel, of the same style, and I think that's hard to do.
Yeah, I mean it holds up still. Like it's not jarring. It's not like why do we have this bad CG looking kind of like character inserted into our awesome 2D movie? It's like no,
Yeah.
he looks 2D. I mean there's an otherworldly element to it, but it's very faint. It's like faint enough, and he's supposed to stand out anyway, so it plays into that. So it works. It's flawless.
Right. Well, and you also got the fact that, yeah, like you said, he's supposed to stand out. Well, unfortunately, when other films have used that same tactic, it makes something stand out in a way that I think doesn't serve the film. It just makes it seem like we wanted to put a CG monster here or something. They don't really make it seem like it's belonging. I think to tie it into something that's recent, Batman Cape Crusader, the vehicles are CG, and they've been doing CG vehicles.
Yeah, I mean they've been doing that since Under the Red Hood.
Right, but it looks, the way they did the toon shading of it in that series, I think actually works better than usual.
I would concur with that. Yeah.
So anyway, it's nice when they make it work. I think it's better with machinery, and not so great when they do it with an organic character like the Hydra in Hercules. Yeah.
Sure. All right, so let's talk about kind of cause and effect here. So the power station scene in which Hogarth and the Giant meet, really great. Just kind of like kind of cause and effect, and like how Hogarth is basically Hogarth is like he's there at the power station with the Giant. Like as things like Annie arrives home, and like like the power goes out, and like it's just kind of nice that we're seeing like I guess let me rephrase it here. We have some good cause and effect, and just how like we're building to Annie's kind of making her way to Hogarth, and like and just like we built up just kind of like the Giant's actions and kind of getting Hogarth to go to the power station to kind of see what's going on. He's like he's watching the movie. We know something foreboding's going to happen. It's kind of cozy. He's doing like the turbo Twinkie, and it's then the antenna has a bite out of it essentially.
Right. Well, for my money, the best cause and effect in the film is the Giant discovering Hogarth's lifeless body in the similar way that he discovered the dead deer.
Okay, let's just jump to that, okay? Because easily, that's more. I don't know if cause and effect's the right term for that.
Maybe not cause and effect, but it's more like a foreshadowing moment.
Yeah, well, it's a thematic thing, maybe. Well, maybe thematic.
Yeah. Or thematic. You could say thematic, sure. Yeah.
So with that, too, I want to highlight that just so I don't forget it, because that's my favorite piece of animation in the entire film. That still haunts me in all the right ways. And Steve Markowski animated that scene, which, by the way, this is another revolutionary thing, too, where, at least at the time, because in the 90s, well, not just the 90s, but let's just say especially the 90s, when, again, the whole reason we have the animation arms race is the Disney Renaissance is going very well. The way Disney did their animation is they kind of assign people to characters. Yes. Now, Brad Bird, again, this is not like, I don't know if he's like the first person to ever do this, but because they're on such a time crunch, they had to really streamline the process, which is why, they dedicated so much time to the storyboarding process, because they could correct the mistake there much more easily than later on. And the other thing is that he assigned people to just take on full sequences versus specific characters. So that's kind of something very, Brad Bird at the very least popularized, or at least, I don't know, maybe at the very least that's what he did for this movie. And I think it shows that he gave each of his animators like sequences and kind of like to really shine. Like for example, Brad Bird animated the Hogarth on caffeine scene. Um, anyway, so Steve Markowski, when the giant gets shot down, he crashes, and essentially we see a seemingly lifeless Hogarth there, and just the trembling and the emotional, just the range of emotions he goes through. And the thing that kills me is just like the he reaches out and he just like the whole like the no just kind of this just kind of
Yeah.
like moving of the shoulders and the hands, and then he gets so pissed off at the armies they're shooting at him while his friend lies there dead. Now, the framing of that too is like Hogarth in the foreground, the giant just looking so vulnerable despite being this huge this huge metal man.
I mean, absolutely. The being able to give a character like that uh, true emotion, I think, is that's the strength of the movie.
And also too, just the with what you said, the fact that he initially, he touches the body, but then he doesn't because he remembers what Hogarth said about the deer, like the whole essentially don't do that, the whole like respect the dead kind of thing. Like it's just like
Right.
that's what I'm
Right.
saying. You're right. There's a harmony there. There's a symmetry.
Well, it's nice that it shows you how intentional the film is. They didn't
Mhm.
put anything in there just to put it in there.
So I'm so glad you brought that up, and I'm sure you've heard this before, Phil, but I'm going to tell it to you just in case.
Okay.
The One of Brad Bird's key philosophies we love quoting around here all the time. It's very, very Pixar kind of philosophy as well, but it's something that I'm sure like probably was birthed here, but he put a label to it when he did The Incredibles. We use every part of the buffalo. That's what he did. He used every part of the buffalo. So basically, an animated film, or I guess a film in general, when you don't waste anything, everything that's set up gets paid off. When there's like nothing left over, nothing just thrown in there for the heck of it. That's using every part of the buffalo.
I mean, that's a pretty great way to put that.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It
Because
kind of
really,
makes me want to go get a buffalo burger, honestly.
but yeah, so so when they were doing The Incredibles, he put up this sign that basically had like like a sign where you put like special of the day or whatnot. He basically had this like little like sign where you put like the letters on it, and it said use every part of the buffalo. It's like the credo on The Incredibles.
Yeah, that's good.
Anyway, so yeah, so again, also harkening back to some great Iron Giant kind of animation moments. For me, another one that always stuck with me. So there is this. So again, with the fantastic arc of the giant, as he's kind of developing more and more personality. The train scene is such a great example of this, where he kind of in a split second he goes from again pet like he's eating the railroad tracks because he's hungry to train's coming, we're freaking out. You gotta help me fix this. And then the giant like he's a perfectionist. There's something there that I swear to God, Phil, every time I always see it in my mind. Every time I'm just trying to perfect something or I'm thinking about a character perfecting something, I'm always thinking of the giant lining up, and the way we edited that scene is just so flawless to me. Just seeing like him line up those tracks just so perfectly.
Yeah. Well, as a fellow perfectionist, I can't argue with you.
But it's still though, it's great intense editing where it's like he's just got in, you're rooting for him, and the second he gets it, then he's hit by a train, which leads to just it's a big old mess. And poor Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson, Ollie Johnson loving his trains, just wrecked one like right in the side of the giant's head.
Well, life likes to throw trains at us when we least expect it.
Especially for Spider-Man.
With great power comes great animated movies.
Yeah, we know Spider-Man's weakness. It's trains.
Mm.
Yep. Anyway, so let's see. So again, it's really just quality animation there. Kind of gives a lot of personality, shows that he's developing, and then we do kind of things later on, like Hogarth in the barn. Shows him all these comics, a few nods like the Spirit and the Superman comic and Atomo. And we see we kind of see Superman striking a chord with him. Now, I wonder. I want your take on this, Phil.
Huh?
Do you think subconsciously the Iron Giant likes Superman because he's forgotten it, but deep down, like in his deep suppressed in his memory, he knows he can fly. Do you think he likes Superman because he can fly, or just because Hogarth says he's the good guy?
I'm going to lean more towards the Hogarth saying he's the good guy, but I would also say that probably has more to do with the animators having an appreciation for the classics.
Well, I bring it up because we see the Giant has a thing with visual stimuli where he sees the gun, he goes in defensive mode, and earlier in the comics he sees something that he looks at Atomo, and Atomo is he lingers on it, he sees himself there. And I wonder if perhaps Superman was also a thing of like, well, I can fly, and basically this is what I want to be, channeling another ability that I have that is not destructive, that is just flight.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past the character. I don't know if that's something that the animators were really baking into it. But I mean, it's a great theory, and I don't think it's without merit.
Here, real quick, I want to read off a few comments here. Brad Bird should direct a superhero movie one of these days. Agreed, and of those superhero movies, seriously. Though I'd like to see Brad Bird direct a Superman movie. Wouldn't we all? Wouldn't that be great? Like the two things it'd be great to see Brad Bird do: Superman movie and a Star Wars movie. Unfortunately, he was offered the Star Wars movie, but he turned it down for Tomorrowland.
And we all know how that turned out.
Yep. But yeah, seriously, Brad Bird doing a Superman movie would be tremendous. But more so, I think an animated Superman movie would be even better for him. But yeah, let's see. Little Blue says Superman. I believe he means delivered like Superman. It's a guess.
Yeah.
All right, let's see.
Or maybe it's really just someone offering two different foods: soup or man.
So basically, it's broth or cannibalism.
It's Soylent Green. It's a reference to Soylent Green.
Oh,
Or maybe the Twilight Zone. It's a cookbook.
there you go.
Now that was dreadful. Yes, I was going for that. Thank you.
All right. Okay, let's see. We set up the Iron Giant can piece himself together after the train crash. So again, every part of the buffalo, literally. Let's see.
Buffalo.
All right, let's see. What else should we? Okay. So a lot of great visuals with the Giant we have as well. Again, we have like when his hand is detached and going through the house. It's just it's this giant. Essentially, it's this giant dog in the house.
Indeed.
He's it's great seeing the Giant like eat the scrap metal. I mean, that's a lot of fun. Him doing cannonballs and like the lake and just causing this giant tidal wave. I think one of the funniest visuals is him in front of like the Cosmo Burger sign.
Yeah.
When he's hiding, he's just I've seen like some people have done figures of that over the years. It's always like that amuses me. And he's doing like the G-Force simulator thing with Hogarth. So we definitely see the fun of having like a kind of a giant friend.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope they would focus a little bit on the fun aspect of it.
Speaking of which, here's something no one really ever talks about. I love the arc between the Giant and Dean. Like
Oh, sure.
Like the outsider that the Iron Giant warms up to with Dean. He's again, we have like the hilarious thing with the with the art sculptures thing where like the thing currently in your mouth is art. And just the fact that he kind of teaches the Giant a little bit of art. I think that really kind of bonds them to each other. And initially he was like he's gonna he sees Dean possibly like running away with his new friend or about to like do something with him. He picks him up and he's like, no, don't squish him. That's Dean. We like Dean.
Well, is it that, or is it just the artist of the film poking fun at what the stereotypical artist talks like and behaves like? You know what I mean? Whenever I see a cartoon or a film like that, poking fun at an artist character, I always think they're making fun of each other and themselves.
I don't think that's far off. And again, I think I see a lot of it's a thing with a lot of the Brad Bird movies, specifically The Incredibles. The animators all the time they like taking pokes at him, and like they a lot of it's unintentional because again he's so enthusiastic during the pitches and like during like the story meetings and the character designs, and because of that, Brad Bird ends up getting a lot of himself put into the characters. A lot of times unintentionally. A lot of times the animators will do that either as a kind of a bit of a prank on him, or they'll do it just kind of like as, well, this is what he's telling us, and we kind of want to embody his vision. So a lot of him goes into this character. So that's why we end up with a lot of the characters in The Incredibles have a lot of Brad Bird in them. Like there's some Brad in Bob. There's a lot of Brad in Syndrome, to the point
Sure.
where the animators were like they called out the animators like under his breath, like, okay, I know what you're doing, by the way. Yeah, I know it's, you made Syndrome look like me, you made the bad guy look like me.
Hey,
So there's a lot of that.
if you can't make fun of the boss, then
Exactly. So I'm just saying, in that respect, I could see very much so like Dean embodying a lot of Brad Bird, and also Hogarth. Hogarth, I can see is like young Brad Bird.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So
Brad
those are the
Brad
two elements I'd see. Speaking of which, Kent Mansley, we got to talk about Kent. So Kent is he's a lot of fun. He's voiced by the wonderful Chris McDonald, and he's a riot. How do you feel about Mansley?
Again, none of the characters feel out of place, and look, that's one of the things that I think the film shines at, is pairing these classically, or not classic, but just really, really well acted characters with a drawing that looks like it's coming out of their face. I mean, that's a really strong thing for a film to be able to successfully claim.
Yep. Yeah, he's
He
I
looks
like.
like saying it.
Yeah, I think he looks like the classic government, kind of a government lackey. He's the analogy I kind of have for Mansley, looking back on it, like years later, is that he's kind of like he's a government agent version of Walter Peck from Ghostbusters.
Okay. Yeah, I could see the
It's like if Walter Peck had a little bit more military power behind him, I could see it basically, but not, he's not a general or anything. He doesn't have like an actual rank, but he's just kind of like he works for the government.
He's just so into what he believes and what he does that he's willing to leave a blazing trail of corpses behind him.
Yeah. But that's the thing, he's closed-minded, he's ego-driven. So essentially, he's in a way of looking at it, and this is going to be a weird comparison. It's a little like imagine if Gaston was in the Cold War era, in a sense, but he wasn't as looks oriented. It was like, what if it's just more personal philosophy, where this guy's like we have that scene in the drugstore where they're at at the counter and doing the ice cream thing. He's basically explaining like why you need to tell me where this giant is. There's a whole thing of like, it doesn't matter if he's like, he wasn't made by us. Like, that's fundamentally what sticks in his crawl. That's why he's there, is what he cares about. This guy embodies like kind of the worst kind of aspect of the 50s, and that there's a lot of like, it's pro-America in a negative way, just in the sense of like, if it's not us, we don't want it. We want to blow it up. We want to, again, during like the Red Scare era, it's a whole like, again, Sputnik opens this movie, and that was a big deal when they made this too, by the way. The whole thing of like, this was like the first time they didn't have like Bugs Bunny in the opening when they did the Warner Brothers logo. And yeah, Barry McCarthy, yes. And the reason for that was, Brad wanted to set the right tone, and what they did was they kind of had like they compromised on, okay, we'll have like the Looney Tunes circle, but it'll be like a radar kind of thing. And with that radar thing, we hear Sputnik. The first thing we hear, and honestly, the first thing that we see in the movie is Sputnik, and that's kind of the whole Cold War thing, where Sputnik is just a useless satellite. It looks cool. It was a whole thing of like, hey, we shot something, just anything, doesn't do anything. We shot something into space, and the Russians did it first, and it's all like jealousy and just like like, look, they shot something in space, and maybe it's watching us. We don't know it. They got there first. We don't trust the Russians. They're not us.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much encapsulating the era that they put it in. I think they did a great job making it feel of that time. But what's great about that idea is you could take that idea and put it into any decade, and
Timeless.
you could call that theme uh, otherism, and I think that's still a thing that people can relate to today.
Yeah, and also Eden Kimbrough asked, like, did he say Gaston in the Cold War era? Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it might not be a good comparison, but I don't know, it's just kind of like instinctive. Just in terms of like this big, boisterous kind of like he's very secure in this belief. He thinks very highly of himself. And he's I think the way Brad Bird or one of the maybe Jeff Lynch put it was that he's very much he's a big fish in a small pond. In Maine versus like in Washington, where he's a very like low middle management kind of guy. Because he thinks he's going to show up like Father Porter. Okay, look, something big, Marv. I'm here when something big happens, and this is then of course the end after his car gets eaten like a ham sandwich. It's like yeah.
Cold War thinks like Gaston. I don't have any more. That's all I got.
No, I figured that. Anyway, let's see. Also, of course, the way we dispatch with Kent Mansley is again an example of a classy bathroom joke. Just the idea that Hogarth gives him a landslide. Uh, I love that nickname for it. The landslide is the laxative, the choco lax, and the ice cream.
Yeah, for me, it's usually getting some late night tacos.
Yeah, no, I remember that episode of the live. I remember that episode of the live draw with Phil Machi. I remember that.
Oh, that was.
It
Well,
was
did
very
I?
much like, okay, guys, bear with me. Let me just finish drawing this. Like, no comments. It's like, okay, I'll be back in 5 minutes. Stream goes for 2 hours anyway.
Oh my
So,
god! Did, did I televise that? That sounds horrible.
well, yeah, you'll remember that episode. If I were you, I would have blocked it out too, Phil.
Oh man, I wish I would have.
Anyway, let's see good. All right, right. So again, with nothing wasted, and Mansley's, he's constantly going to the, he's having some gastrointestinal distress, and that leads him to the gag where
Did
like,
you
are
say
you okay?
Gaston intestinal distress?
Well, I was saying gastrointestinal, but I guess you could make it gastrointestinal distress. Anyway, yeah, we have like him developing the photos in the bathroom, and Annie saying like, "Hey, are you okay? We got that. I got the extra toilet paper you needed." So it's like nothing's wasted. Like we're kind of putting him in a place he needs to be for a gag, and we're also like we see him as a joke, but he becomes more and more of a serious threat. And like Hogarth forgot his camera, and that's Hogarth's undoing. It's like we're not wasting anything. And one of the trippiest moments is how trippy was that interrogation scene with Kent and Hogarth?
Pretty darn.
Yeah, I always when I was a kid, I always thought that was maybe I just thought that was like a dream initially, and then we kind of explained that you're just gonna think it's all a bad dream. Hogarth is very intentional that we make it almost kind of surreal, almost like Stranger in Fiction.
Well, one of the best things a film can do is know when to rein it back in, but also know when to do a little bit of something surprising and shocking. And I think knowing when to hold yourself back and knowing when to let loose—that's what makes those moments stand out more.
Yeah. So again, we've kind of talked about Mansley, but the opposite of Mansley, John Mahoney is the general. Of course, the wonderful John Mahoney, sadly no longer with us. Just him. Fun fact: the military apparently they loved this movie. Well, I know everyone loved this movie, but the military was really impressed, and they lauded Brad Bird and Company, saying that we're so glad you didn't make the army like like a bad guy or like the obvious bad guy or anything. Like just the fact that we saw that this is Mansley going off the reservation. It's like him being an idiot, and like lying to the general and saying he's killed a small child, sir. Like causing all these problems. And we see Mahoney's being, the general is being very very even keel, just saying, like, look, you should be able to show me actual proof here. I'll get some troops down there. And of course, when he hears, like, wait a minute, you're saying, like, it's responding to the gun. Like, maybe we shouldn't keep shooting at it, and that might stop it. He's kind of smart there. We see kind of a nice tact on, like the general sends Hogarth like the piece at the end. Like, I don't know. I think uh, it's a leap, but I think Mahoney. I think he lended a lot of character to that general, and I think I think he
Yeah,
kind of added that.
he wasn't just a one note character. I mean, I think when you see him asking about the bomb situation, and for a moment there he's about ready to tell what's his face that he's crazy, but then he goes, no, no, no. It's clear that it responds to whatever's attacking to it, so we draw it away from the town, and then we'll go ahead and bomb it. So he had a moment where he needed to be convinced. It wasn't like he just wanted to bomb it everything, just out the
Yeah,
gate.
he's not a gun-toting general. He's not like yeah, blow it
Well,
up. Ah.
I mean, he is definitely a gun-toting general, but he's not without having a reasonable bone in his
Like
body
he's
here.
an actual military leader you might believably want, like like in command
Sure.
of in command of that power, because like he's the
Right.
one, he's not the one launching it. He's like, because he's hearing like, oh god, the situation has changed. No, we're not going to launch this thing.
Right. Right.
Mansley's going like, launch the missile now, and the giant's like, where's the giant Mansley? He's like, he's right behind him, like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, let's see. Okay, so speaking of which, big moment. Dean, again, we built this dynamic with the giant. I love the moment where Dean is a responsible adult here, where he sees that Hogarth is in peril and he kind of snaps defensively at the giant. And I love that Dean, this compared to the giant, very puny guy, compared to the giant, well, the little giant, he is he's yelling at him, and the giant looks so vulnerable. He looks like a little kid he's being yelled at, or like told to go home, or like we would never want to see you again, kind of thing. Where he feels horrible about endangering Hogarth unintentionally. He's responding to like the little sparkler gun thing, and again it leads to this that low point of like he's like the giant's like playing as Superman. They has to like remove the giant S. It's very sad.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, so again, our third act of this movie is very strong. We have like it's very economically paced too, where the giant just kind of like stumbles into the town, like saving two small kids from dying, and the town's kind of on his side. And then, then things take a turn when the military just kind of shoots at the giant. After again, it's a shame too because they had such a great like cover up of the giant too. Like he basically is designed, he's dressed up like this art installation. So the military has like the dress down that Mansley gets from the general is priceless.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. Anyway, sorry, I'm kind of going a few places here. Dean, I love that Dean when it's explained to when Dean like figures out he puts two and two together, which so rarely do we do. Where we have like Dean's like he was he was responding to the gun. And that's when he's like on Hogarth's side. Like, no, you hop on the motorcycle. We'll catch him faster this way. He's realizing, oh God, I've sent him off when I shouldn't have done that. And there's like regret there, and it's nice kind of arc there.
For sure.
In a record amount of time, like we didn't drag it out the whole thing of like, and like that's the end of Act 2, and like no, we have to wait a whole like till like the middle of Act 3 for him to get on board. Like no, it's just like literally less than a minute after it happens.
Yeah, I mean, the pacing is super important for sure.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Anyway, sorry. So back to the third act here. So, so the chase, the military chasing him while he has Hogarth is just originally it was going to be a lot longer. Unfortunately, that they could not put in the signature edition. This would have been too hard to. I guess it would have been too hard to animate. There was going to be a lot more. The giant was going. There's going to be like a kind of a firefight in. The giant wasn't going to use his weapons when he was. Sorry, he didn't use his weapons yet until he thought Hogarth was dead. I'm confusing that, but the giant was basically he was originally we were going to have a scene where he's being attacked by planes in the air and he was going to go underwater for a brief bit and it was going to be attacked by a submarine, which was kind of interesting. So there's going to be a lot. The scene was going to be a lot longer, and Mark Andrews was having a grand time with it. It kept having to be scaled back because of like budget and time, and it was running low on everything, so they had to kind of trim it to the bare essentials, which thankfully still included flight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a great little sequence, and also leads to a great inspiring shot I saw nonstop every time it would premiere on Cartoon Network or Toonami or what have you, where the giant like you can fly, and then we see Annie like reacting to like Hogarth as it just flies right off the side of the cliff.
It definitely has some of those great movie moments that you can take out of context and they still work.
By the way, I don't think we need to dwell on her a lot, but just to kind of shout her out, Jennifer Aniston, one of the best things she's done.
Oh, I try to dwell on Jennifer Aniston as long as I can.
That's true. Yeah, she is. She's rather attractive. But yeah, seriously though, her performance, it's just it's a real performance. Like I love the bit where she finds Hogarth at the power station, and she's just it's a real mom performance where she's just she her main concern is that the kid's all right. She doesn't want to yell at him, but it's just like what I just want to get you home, okay? Just enough.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see. Anyway, so after we reveal Hogarth's alive and everything, but again, when Hogarth is thought to be dead, the giant snaps. I love when that dent like pops out of his head, like the dent fills, and like he's back. He's just upset, and then he's had it up to here with everyone gunning at him unfairly, and he's dispatching with the military, but not killing anyone. He's using the weapons. We learn that the giant has this awesome kind of weaponized form. And yeah, it's really it's how from a design standpoint, Phil. I mean, like how cool is this?
The dent popping out.
Well, no, I mean just like the whole like after like the weaponized version of the
Oh
giant,
my
like the
gosh! I mean,
Atomo looking version of the
they're
giant.
they hold themselves back the whole film, showing that he doesn't have to be a weapon. So it's just nice to watch them let loose design wise and kind of go crazy sci-fi with it.
Like we strip away the humanity, like the head goes down. He's got like
Yeah,
the three spires. We got the like the from which are now the War of the World.
yeah.
My Mark Andrews went crazy with a whole bunch of like really cool weapon ideas for this sequence. And Mark Andrews, by the way, ended up directing Brave. The big thing I think people really like Mark Andrews from was he not only just worked on The Incredibles, but he's basically the action guy on The Incredibles. He's very much he bores action sequences a lot. He worked on Samurai Jack.
Okay.
In fact, I don't know if he I don't know if he had directed this episode as well, but he was worked on the Scotsman episode of Samurai Jack, or at least one of them.
Oh, that's. I mean, I did not know that.
Yeah, the episode with the Scotsman when they save the Scotsman's wife, like that's Mark Andrews had a lot of involvement in that. I think he might have written it as well. All I know is he was heavily involved in that one.
Okay. Well, I mean, the animation industry is a small industry, so it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Anyway, love Mark Andrews. Point being, my favorite thing he did here was he had like this little disc. The giant had these little like kind of like record player spindle, like little fingers that kind of like they kept hitting like the sides of the disc that then shot out like a bunch of like destructive beams. Like it was like that to me still to this day is like one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I'm a tactile wrist mounted gadget. I'm a gadget guy. I love gadgets. So I love like anything wrist mounted, or at least in this case, wrist mounted adjacent. Like that was like so cool. Yes, Lou Romano, another wonderful Bradbury collaborator. No, I don't believe he was on Iron Giant. I could be wrong. I don't believe he was, but he is great.
I mean, I feel like we got jaded by not getting more toys based off of that stuff.
Yeah, that's a thing. I mean, I think now they're finally putting them out, but it's just like it's too little, too late in a sense.
Oh, it's never too late for toys.
No, it's never. I'm not saying it's too late for toys, but I'm just saying it's like a thing now where like it's like the thing where I pointed out like the Dragon Ball toys, where for example, when I was a kid, there was Bubkiss, and they're hard to find if there were any out there, and the ones they had like now, same thing back in the animated series, they had the Kenner toys, which were cool, but the ones they're making now like they're everything I would have dreamed of as a kid. You know, it's just like all the great toy designs. They took like 20 like 20 years or 2 decades to kind of happen.
Yeah, but think of it this way: now you're an adult, so you can actually afford to get them if you wanted to.
That is true. That is true. But it's funny though. I do remember the Iron Giant did have toys, but I presume toys that are mostly released after the fact. And like the toys, again, it's like a movie that no one had seen. So even if they did have toys, but I don't think they sold well because of the whole because again, no one knew the movie was coming out. So I mean, I remember having some Iron Giant toys, but like seeing more than I actually had though.
I did
But
not have. I did
even
not
then,
have
not
any
a lot.
members.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's just the fact, like, back then they had like there was this one Iron Giant toy which you could transform him into a Tamo. It was like the coolest thing ever. I don't know if I had that or I just saw that in the store. That's the thing, though. That's the problem. Anyway, point being, Giant causing rampant damage there, but Hogarth reaches in with the whole "You are who you choose to be," which again, big cell line and just a great, kind of moment where seemingly he'll blow Hogarth away, with a cannon, and he snaps out of it. And it's a really nice moment. And then, of course, it leads to the ballistic missile that Mansley, like an idiot, just kind of sets off. He's about to bomb him. Again, it's kind of a reflection on the '50s where all the duck and cover stuff was BS. It'll never save you, and it's like, oh god, the bomb's gonna hit because of our own paranoia.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We are going to die for our country, Mansley. Screw our country. And he just tries to run away.
Yeah.
Saw it off anyway. um, yeah. So the giant. Now this is really great here. So the giant makes the Superman sacrifice here, which is a really great heroic moment for him. I think it's really important that we had that soul scene and we explain death to him because in explaining that to him and showing that he understands that it adds everything to this scene. So he's not just doing this cavalier, yeah, sure, I'll be fine. It's like, no, he knows what death is. He knows he's going to die if he does this, which
Mm-hmm.
makes it all the more heroic.
Absolutely.
So the whole no Tony Facilli did this no following moment here where he says stay no following, which is a sad symmetrical kind of payoff. There's like he said it back to kind of the puppy dog days of like no don't follow me home to no following. I'm not coming back. But it's and again an answer as Jacob's pointing out here. You are who you choose to be, and he chooses to be Superman, which is like one of the oddly again, appropriately Warner Bros. Movie. This is one of the best Superman moments ever. Frankly, Superman's not even in it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's Warner Brothers, if they didn't make a reference to the DC heroes, I think they would be, I don't know, remiss.
But it's a heck of a sacrifice too. Just him and his last words, Superman, closing the eyes, just thinking of like what he sees himself as, and then just blown to smithereens. It's a somber moment too, and a somber transition. And the giant died. It's really nice they erected that statue to the giant. The whole idea,
Absolutely.
beautiful, and the fact that Dean made that too. That's really sweet.
Mm-hmm. I think that needs to exist somewhere.
It does.
It does.
Well, kind of. I don't know if they bronzed it, but they do have like statues of the giant holding Hogarth like that. So I mean, that is kind of a real thing.
Okay.
You're saying like an actual like to scale statue, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm saying like the way
No, no, that wouldn't that be if in Maine they actually here's the thing: we have the RoboCop statue in Detroit. That but would be the logical next step. Wouldn't that be cool? Because think about it: in Maryland they have the Jim Henson bench, which essentially you have Jim Henson, Kermit the Frog, and you can sit on the bench with him. You got the Fonz statue in Milwaukee. You got the RoboCop statue in Detroit, and God, I think there might be a Batman statue somewhere. I could be wrong. I think I know there was a campaign for it. I don't think it actually happened. But the point being is like we have like these fun commemorative statues in certain places of the world. Oh, Lou Costello has one. There you go, Patterson, New Jersey. I'm sorry, I just realized I'm now listing off, just droning on, listing off all the historical kind of fun statues that we have. Regardless, Iron Giant would be a welcome addition in Maine. Like, why not? What else is in Maine? I mean, come on.
I don't know. I've never been to Maine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jacob says, it's a shame Cleveland doesn't have a Superman statue. Te- I, it, I, well, I forget where it is, but wherever they have the Superman celebration at, there is a Superman statue, but sadly, it was beheaded.
Well, that
Um,
just
well,
that just
well,
took a grim turn.
well, actually, sorry, let me scratch. I think for a brief time it was beheaded. I forget if it was they had to they adjust they fix up the statue and they put a new head on, or if it was like literally beheaded. But for a time they have to remove the head to fix it up. So I don't know if it was vandalism or just like a temporary thing. But I've never checked in with it again. I don't know if they ever like fixed it or if they continue to maintain that statue. So there is a Superman statue somewhere. I assume it's still there. It's like in I think it's a place they kind of called Metropolis, but it's anyway. It's worth looking into, regardless.
It is. It is. And there is a new movie being filmed in Cleveland. That's very true.
Mm, okay, so interestingly, the original ending of the Iron Giant was Brad. So here's the thing. So I should have mentioned this a lot earlier. Sorry. So the Iron Giant has two writers on it. Brad Bird, who kind of came up with the idea, and he did. Well, sorry, Ted Hughes did the Iron Man, which is then essentially adapted, but very radically by Brad Bird. And then the studio insisted on him bringing on another writer, and they had I think it's yeah, the writer is Tim McCannelly's, I think his name is. Anyway, this guy, he had a lot of good ideas. He was he's a good writer, and he had the most important, from what I understand, assuming it's to be believed, he had the most important story addition to the film, which was don't kill the giant at the end. Brad
Yeah.
Bird originally killed him. Basically, the giant didn't come back and was sad, but he basically made the argument you can't kill ET.
Well, you can, but nobody will want to watch the movie.
What's the thing? Well, we have to bring ET back.
Yeah.
So that's essentially kind of. I'm so glad he made that point because it's a feel good ending. The sacrifice is felt, and there is hope. With the little screw kind of like finding its way all the way to the Arctic to find him. It's a hopeful kind of a revival of an ending. He's like the giant. The giant's going to be okay. He died for our sins, but hey, he's coming back.
Absolutely. I mean, you got to end the film with a little bit of hope. Otherwise, people leave your film feeling like, well, what was the point of that?
Yeah. So I mean, I think we pretty much reached the end of it. I think we kind of covered everything.
I think so too.
I mean, how do you feel about it?
I feel like not a lot of films, uh, have this kind of longevity and impact on people, and so it's a pretty incredible achievement that we're still talking about it 25 years later.
Yeah. I guess I would kind of round things out by saying, the Iron Giant theatrically, tragically died, and kind of, it's very much like. Let me ask you this first, Phil. Do you think they should have waited? Do you think they were right to release it when they did, even though in the tomes of history, it was a box office bomb, but again, years later, it's cherished, and it's beloved, and defended fervently? Or do you think they should have like ran the risk of maybe it being shelved like a Batgirl or kind of what we're doing now with some of these Warner Brothers films? Had they waited like a few months to a year after Tarzan?
I mean, the reality is that they don't know. None of them really know, and if they knew, they would release it when it would make them the most money. That's the answer. So it's a gamble, and there's no way to know. Um, and if they knew when it would be a big hit, that's what they would have done.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. All right. So with that in mind, so again, theatrically, it died a gruesome death, but the soul of the film lived on, and much like Hogarth and the Iron Giant said, souls don't die. This film never died. It never ultimately. It never. It's the soul. soul of this film, the film itself, the spirit of it, the spirit in which it's enjoyed and loved and cherished, it lived on, man. It lived on despite being blown to pieces by a bomb. So much like the Iron Giant essentially is the allegory for the success of the film. That it took a while to reassemble, but it endured, and it's reflected on very very fondly, and it has like kind of statues erected to it, like even like in Ted Lasso, like we have grown soccer players just like crying their eyes out at the ending because it brings it's you're inhuman if you don't feel just like a little too, even if you don't like fully have the waterworks going, if you don't feel just like chills when like the deer moment happens or the Iron Giant says Superman. You got to feel something. Otherwise, you're a robot, but not a robot with amnesia.
Well said.
There we go. All right, so that does it. I want to thank the folks for tuning in, listening to us animation geeks, prattle on for about over an hour and a half. Got Lucas Crane. Got Jacob moderating. We got Code Geass Anime Fan. We got Little Blue. We got Eden Kimbrough as a welcome addition. And of course, be remiss if I didn't thank Phil Machi for making time in his busy schedule to join us here tonight.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. It's nice to talk about a movie that has obviously made a big impression on people.
Yeah. All right, and remember, folks, you want to celebrate the Iron Giant's anniversary? Watch the Giant's Dream if you want like a real treat, and if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. All right, that about does it. See you around, folks.
Have a good night.
Man.